So look, I thought this being my first time addressing this group, I thought it might be useful just to briefly mention my track record in the industry. My background is as a scientist, and I've got 50 years in the drug development business, and that all started with a PhD at the University of Sydney Medical School that led to the university manufacturing and selling a drug for kidney transplant patients. So that was the start. And since then, I've founded and run 4 drug development companies, starting in 1994 with Novagen, which at the time was, I recall, just the 3rd or 4th biotech company to list on the ASX. And ironically, we listed exactly the same day as CSL. Now, 9 years later, with Novagen, a $15 million float had turned into a company worth over $800 million. So all of these 4 companies originally IPO'd at values of between 15 and 20 million, and all of them went on or hopefully are going on to some notable success. Next slide, thanks. So these are the key metrics, and I'll just mention 2 of them. The first one being a cash position, and the next one being the news flow situation. We've started this year with $23 million in cash. We're expecting an R&D rebate of at least $4 million in the next couple of weeks. And in 4 weeks' time, we have 6 million options that are due to be exercised, and they're going to be underwritten, so we can be guaranteed of $6 million coming in. So that gives us a potential cash position of about $33 million, which puts us in a very strong position to finish off or execute our clinical program for the year, and in fact take us into 2022. In terms of news flow, we're looking at quite a considerable news flow for the next 6 to 12 months. With 4 clinical trials, all of them have inbuilt regular reporting points, plus a pretty extensive preclinical program. These can all be counted on to generate plenty of news. Next slide, thanks. Now, I've got to be careful I don't turn this talk into a science lesson, but this is the only techie slide you're going to be asked to look at, and you need to have some idea of the drug we're talking about today. Now, the drug is Veyonda. It's the company's main asset, and it's what's known as an immunotherapy drug. And that simply means that it stimulates the immune system to fight cancer. Now, cancer cells should not be able to survive in the body. If the immune system is doing its job, it will kill them. And cancer cells are able to survive because they trick the immune system, and they do that tricking using a basket of tricks. That includes disguising themselves, in essence, hiding behind a cloak so the immune cells can't see them. It includes putting on a suit of armour that the immune cells can see them but can't get to them. And it also includes forcing the immune cells out of the tumour. And this is the key point, in that cancers use multiple tricks. They don't just rely on one single trick. They've got a basket of goodies up their sleeve. And this is why immunotherapy, as incredibly promising as it is, doesn't work for most patients. And this is despite immunotherapy being universally regarded as the future of cancer therapy. And the reason it's not working is because the great majority of immunotherapy drugs are only looking to overcome single tricks. They don't go for the full basket of tricks. And that means that if immunotherapy is going to be effective, we're either going to have to mix and match different immunotherapy drugs, each one having its own particular action in order to cover off the full range of tricks, or we're going to have to develop drugs that have multiple tricks, tricks up their own sleeve. And this is where Veyonda comes in. It's a unique drug because it actually fixes up a number of the different tricks that cancer cells are using. So Veyonda is not a one-trick pony. It's a multiple trick pony. And one of the key modes of action is what you see in the middle of the screen, which is something called converting tumours from cold to hot. A cold tumour is one where the cancer cells have forced out all the immune cells. A hot tumour is one where they've been allowed to come back in. The vast majority of human tumours are cold. And that means that if your immunotherapy drug is working around the edges of this, or working on immune cells that are outside the tumour, unless you can get those immune cells back into the tumour, you're not going to see much action. And that's the problem with the current immunotherapy treatments. They are not able to achieve this conversion of cold to hot. And that is categorical what Veyonda does. Now, the immunotherapy market currently is worth about 30 Australian dollars, 30 billion Australian dollars. And that's coming from a number of immunotherapy treatments, just a handful of treatments that collectively are working in less than about 1 in 10 cancer patients. It's more like about 5% of cancer patients. So if we could get immunotherapy to work in more patients, that represents the biggest prize in oncology. And with many analysts throwing around values of over $150 billion in terms of annualized sales. Now, that large prize naturally has brought a lot of players into the race, and Noxopharm is one of them. But we're confident that based on how we know Veyonda is working, that it's a standout prospect because it isn't one of these one-trick ponies. Next slide, thanks. Noxopharm is testing Veyonda as an immunotherapy drug in 4 programs. All of these are underway and they all involve several hundred patients. 3 of the programs in cancer patients, and one of them is in COVID-19 patients. Now, you're going to be hearing a lot about these programs over the course of the year. They're all exciting programs. Just very briefly, the Ionic program is particularly exciting because it's using Veyonda with another drug called Opdivo, which is owned by the big US pharma company Bristol Myers Squibb. Now, last year, Opdivo's sales were US dollars $8 billion, and that accounted for about 30% of the company's revenue. And yet Opdivo struggles to work in most cancer patients. Most cancers are resistant to Opdivo. So the rewards for us being able to help Opdivo work in a lot more patients are going to be pretty obvious. Now, I could talk about any one of these programs today, but next slide, thanks. I'm just going to talk about the lupin study today. Next slide. The drug is called lutetium PSMA 617, which is too much of a mouthful. So I'm going to just refer to that as the new Novartis drug, because Novartis acquired this drug in 2018 in a $9 billion deal when they bought 2 companies. And the figure you see on the left is a man with advanced prostate cancer. Every dot you see there is a single secondary tumour. And all those dots is the reason why prostate cancer is invariably fatal once it becomes metastatic. And most of those tumours are in the skeleton. And skeletal tumours, bony tumours, are incredibly painful. They can't spread, so they cause a lot of pressure, and that causes pain. Now, Novartis is the 6th largest pharma company in the world. They have a market value of in excess of 200 billion US dollars. So they see this as being a major play. And the company made an announcement a couple of years ago before they bought into this technology, that they see this sort of technology as the future. And the drug is injected intravenously. It carries a radioactive isotope. It seeks out all the tumours, so it's a way of delivering radiation to all those dozens, if not hundreds of tumours around the world, around the body in a far more effective way than you're ever going to be able to deliver radiation by standard radiotherapy. Next slide, thanks. Now, the reason why drugs like this are urgently needed, and this is an exciting drug, the reason they're needed is because of this, the sheer statistics of prostate cancer. It's a major problem. And as you can see on the graph on the right, the incidence is exponential. The older you get, the more likely you are to get prostate cancer. And as the world is undergoing, and we're seeing increasing longevity, we're all living longer. This means that cancers like prostate cancer are going to become a major problem. So already the world has an estimated 360,000 deaths from prostate cancer, and that looks set to rise. Next slide, thanks. Now, this new drug is not a panacea. It's not going to cure people. In fact, it's expected to help roughly 40 to 50% of men live longer, which is something, because it's certainly better than the alternative. And the question that St Vincent's Hospital here in Sydney played a leading role in the development of this technology. They've been part of this Novartis drug from its very beginning. And they approached us about 3 years ago, and they asked the question, did we think that Veyonda would help the Novartis drug work in more men, and in those where it was working, provide a much deeper effect, so you end up with longer survival. And so we agreed to do this, and it's a phase 2 study has been set up, and involves 56 men. They've all got late stage cancer. They're all typically like that man you see on the left. They have no remaining treatment options. They have an anticipated survival of between about 2 and 6 months, and on average that would be about 4.5 months. So these are men who are already in palliative care with no remaining treatments. So they were given a combination treatment over 6 cycles. Next slide, thanks. And this is the data that we've presented to date. Now, a bit of background first. The first thing is we're measuring something called the median overall survival. And this is the standard measure that bodies like the FDA need to see before they approve a new drug. It simply is measuring that time when half the men are still alive and half of them are deceased. And it's a pretty relevant thing, apart from for the regulators, a pretty relevant thing for a patient too. Because if you are a patient deciding whether you or not you want to put yourself through another particular treatment, and how important you see what little life you have left, it becomes pretty relevant as to how long you're likely to get out of a new treatment. The second bit of background is that once a man reaches the stage of metastatic disease, as we saw in that picture on the last slide, there are 3 standard treatments, 3 chemotherapy treatments available. They're referred to as first line, second line, and third line. And you go into each new line after the previous treatment has failed, which it does eventually in all men. And eventually you end up in what's end stage cancer. Now, the evidence suggests that Novartis are looking to introduce this new drug after second line therapy. In other words, they want to become the new third line. So the current third line will be pushed to nudged aside and become fourth line. Now, after second line therapy, we know historically that the survival time, the median overall survival time, is 8.5 months. And so the question is, well, what effect will the new Novartis drug have on that? And we know from a study carried out in an Australian hospital, and it's the only one that's been published, that where the Novartis drug was used on its own in these men, the median overall survival went up to 13.5 months. In other words, the drug delivered about a 5-month increase in survival. Now, for the lupin study, the hospital said we want to put Veyonda to the acid test. We're not going to use men after second line, we're going to use them after third line. So these are men who have reached the end of their treatment course. There was nothing left. They're all going to die in roughly 4.5 months. And what was reported 12 months ago is that in these men, the combination treatment delivered a median overall survival of 17.1 months. That is over 12 months extended survival. And you've got to compare that to the extra 5 months that appears to be being delivered by the Novartis drug when you're using much earlier stage people. Next slide, thanks. So in 2 weeks' time, the hospital is going to be reporting on the next updated data. So this will be on the full 56 men. So the previous report 12 months ago was only on 32 men who'd been receiving lower doses of Veyonda. The next report in 2 weeks' time is on the full 56 men and includes all 3 dosage points. Now, the oncologists who are running this study have already acknowledged that 17.1 months overall survival, median overall survival for these men at late stage disease is a remarkable outcome. The question is, what is going to be reported in 2 weeks' time when we look at the full 56 men? Whilst 17.1 months is important and remarkable, anything north of that would be truly significant and would represent, in our view, a potential major breakthrough in the treatment of prostate cancer. Next slide, thanks. So if that's achieved, what would such an outcome be worth? Well, what you're looking at here are the 3 most recent transactions in the prostate cancer space. Pfizer paid $14 billion 4 years ago for a company which is now, the current second line therapy that we were talking about. And Novartis had to pay $6 billion to buy 2 companies to get their hands on this lutetium PSMA drug. So they've invested $6 billion. So the question is, what is Noxopharm worth if the combination of Veyonda and the Novartis drug ultimately represents the new third line treatment? Next slide, thanks. And so it's with that question that I'm going to finish, and happy to answer any questions.
Graham, we're actually out of time, but I have one quick question, and then we'd like to follow up on ShareCafe. We've got some technical questions which I think might help. From a corporate perspective, the company owns a stake in Narada. How does that play into Noxopharm?
Oh, it's about a 30% stake. It was an opportunity to do some drug development that would never have happened if it stayed within Noxopharm. So we spun it out to do exactly what it's doing now. It's a great company, and a 30% stake should deliver a pretty good value in due course.